Hi, everybody. Quick sound check. Can you hear me okay? Am I loud and clear? Great. So, yes, Mas. So today we're on the next chapter, chapter 10, formal testing. I'm just read a section from it. A significant portion of the Ki and Aikido training process is testing or examination. Preparing for and ultimately performing a test of this kind is an opportunity to increase the intensity and focus of your training energy. It is also time when other students and teachers in the dojo become most aware of you and your expanding level of development. Dealing with this kind of periodic exposure is an important part of your training. A sword considered so special that it is hidden away never have the opportunity to be tested for sharpness. So I thought I'd read that because I like that. That's the opening paragraph in that chapter. So formal testing, a few years ago, I say a few, probably like 10 years ago, I wrote an article in Mana newsletter on testing. And I was looking for it the other day and I thought, oh, maybe I'll read something from that, but I couldn't find it on my laptop, so I'll spare you. So anyway, testing is quite unique. It's very different now than how it was. Um, and I say that because when you see a lot of people when they get their rank certificates, they frame them. I've been to people's houses where they have all their ranks displayed on a wall, kind of like an I love me wall. Um, and that's something Suzuki Sensei never did. In fact, pretty much the only certificate he ever framed was when the dojo wanted to frame one of his certificates and put it in his office. Before that, he didn't frame anything. They were in a drawer, literally in a drawer in his office at his house. So at one point, I came across them and I had Sayaka translate the certificates because if you've seen the Shodan certificates now, they're pretty, they're on like manila paper and they're done very nicely. And then, but if you get to the certificates that I think are Godon and above, they're in this really special rice paper that's super super nice. Well, back in the day, that's what they put for a Shodan certificate. They used that really super nice paper for the Shodan certificates. So all of Suzuki Sensei certificates are on that style paper because they didn't quit until later on. So I had this written up, and I thought I'd give you kind of an outline of Suzuki Sensei's testing. And of course, in 1953, Toi Sensei comes here, teaches, and then when he left, he gave Suzuki Sensei his black belt. And that black belt is displayed in our museum, and it's got red lettering on it, which is quite unique. You don't see red lettering very often for his name and what have you, Toi Sensei's name in kanji. And so he left that and said, you're the head instructor. I'm promoting you to Shodan then. His certificate is a little different. It was issued in February 11th, 1955. It's a very simple certificate used on that really nice paper that I just. And what's really unique was it's specifically has Hawaii printed on the certificate in Japanese. And none of his other certificates had that. So Saka said it was probably because he was probably the first Shodan in Hawaii, and they memorialized that on his Shodan certificate back in 1955. So even though it says 1955, he was promoted in 53 by Toi Sensei, but this certificate was actually issued by O Sensei. And it specifically has Morie Ueshiba's, stamp and his name on it. And then in 1956, October 26th, he was issued a very simple certificate that basically says Nidan. And it was also issued by O-sensei. In fact, pretty much all of his certificates were signed by O-sensei until later on. And then, so you figure 53 he's Shodan. 3 years later, 56, he's promoted to Nidan. And then in 58, that's when he became promoted to Sandan. And what's interesting is that is the year that they started actually numbering the certificates. So Suzuki Sensei was actually the 80th person in the Aikikai organization to receive the rank of Sandan. So it's personally says, 80th person promoted. Quite interesting. They do number their certificates nowadays, and so it was they didn't start until in the late 50s. So he was the 80th person to be given the Sandan certificate, and then he was promoted 3 years later to Yandan. There's no significant marks on it, and there's no number on it this time. So back for Sandan he had a number 80, but for Yandan there was no number. So I don't know. There was no rhyme or reason, and Sayaka didn't know either. And then 4 years later, he was promoted to Godan, and that was also numbered, and that was numbered 47. So he was the 47th person in the Aikikai to receive the rank of Godan. So that brings us, he was Godan for a very long time, in a sense, 1965. So he didn't get promoted till to the rank of Rokudan until 1973. And there's an interesting twist because 1973 he's promoted to 6th Dan, Rokudan, and he doesn't get a certificate right away. And he was in Japan right around that time period, and 1974 was the year that he was. 1974 was a year that Toi Sensei separated from the Aikikai, and Suzuki Sensei was at the meeting when they decided to separate. So it was the spring of 74 when they separated. And what's quite interesting is although he was promoted to Rokudan in 1973, and he was number 93 on that certificate, and it was signed by the Doshu, so it was signed by O-sensei's son. Well, after the split, he got another 6th Dan certificate from the Aikikai, and it's dated 1974, the year that they split. So it's like somehow his one in 1973 got missing or something, and then in 74 they reissued it, but they didn't give it to him till later on. In fact, they didn't give him the certificate till 1981 because apparently they were cleaning out the Aikikai and they found the certificate and they felt really bad. So there was a gentleman from the Aikikai said, "Oh, I'm going on vacation to Hawaii. I will bring it to Suzuki Sensei." And he brought the certificate all the way from Japan to Hawaii and gave it to him in 1981. And I remember Suzuki Sensei kind of told me that story that, it was a gentleman by Masoji Yamashita, and he gave it to him in 1981, and there was a letter, apologizing, and it was dated, I think, January 25th, something like that. So that brings Suzuki Sensei up to 6th Dan, and what it was is when he was going to get promoted, Toi Sensei came and said, I want to promote you to 6th Dan. And Suzuki Sensei said, no, Sensei, no. You don't realize if you promote me to 6th Dan, I'm never going to hear the end of it. Please don't promote me. So Toi Sensei said, okay, I won't promote you. Then the following year came by, and Toi Sensei said, Suzuki-san, I want to promote you to 6th Dan or 7th Dan. Let's let's do this formally. And he went, no, 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 Sensei, I don't want to be promoted. Please don't promote me to seventh dan. I'm not deserving. I don't, I don't want to be promoted. And Toi Sensei looked at him and said, you are extremely selfish. And Suzuki Sensei said, he didn't, I don't think he replied to him. He just looked at him. And Toi Sensei said, if I don't promote you, I have to hold everybody else back. Because I have to promote you in order to promote. I can't promote anybody over you or equal to you right now. I have to promote you, otherwise you're holding everyone back. Think how selfish you are. And with that comment, he says that Sumimasen, I will be promoted. Thank you very much for the promotion, and promoted him to seventh dan. And it was done in 1975, and it was done by Toi Sensei on the Shinshin Tuetsu Aikido certificate. That's super nice. And number 2, he was the second person promoted to seventh dan. And what Sayaka told me is that the first person promoted to seventh dan was actually Maruyama Sensei. So likely, if he had taken the promotion when Toi Sensei offered it, he'd probably be number 1. But he waited a year before taking that, and then of course later on, he was promoted to 8th dan, and then later on, of course, 9th dan. But I thought it was quite interesting. You see the flow of promotions. There was no rhyme or reason. There wasn't there was really no testing, so to speak, back in the day for that kind of thing. He said he never took a Shodan test or a Nidan test or anything like that. It was more like, you're ready, I'm going to promote you. And now, of course, it's a bit different. We have formal testing. And, if you recall from the chapter 1 etiquette, it says in there you should never ask to be promoted. The teacher knows when you're ready to be promoted, and you should never refuse a promotion. You should always accept a promotion, because either way, look at it this way: if you ask to be promoted, you're like telling your teacher, oh, by the way, do you notice I'm doing very well? I should be promoted. And if you turn down a promotion, you're telling your teacher, you really don't know what you're seeing here. I am really not ready. So, it's one of those things you don't agree or disagree. You just say, thank you very much. You don't do anything else. Because I remember when I got promoted, and I didn't want to be promoted, but at least I'd heard the story and not know to say no. I think I said, are you sure? I think I gave Sensei the "Are you sure?" Because I was, in the mainland, it's very different on promotions. I say that because they have different timelines. You have to wait a minimum of you have to go from first kyu to Shodan. It takes at least a year minimum to 2 years to wait. I mean, I didn't get promoted to Shodan until I had trained, I think, almost 6 years. 6 years it took me to, and that was pretty much early, because most people didn't get promoted to Shodan until 7, 8 years. Back in the day, it was somebody who got promoted fast to Shodan was 4 years. That was super fast. Where it's and I think the reason why that is because on the mainland they put too much emphasis on what a Shodan is. When if you break it down, the character Sho just means beginning, Dan means rank, so beginning rank, or as Suzuki Sensei would say, now you're officially a beginner, you're officially a beginner when you get the rank of Shodan. Until then you're pretty much a nobody. You're a guest. You're a person who comes to class every once in a while, what have you. And I remember when I got here, I was, I think I was Nidan, and I'd been training almost 8, 9 years, and I was Nidan. And that's when I first got here. I think I waited 6 months, and Curtis Sensei asked me to take my Sandan test, which I did on Kawai. And then after that, there was no other tests for me to take. So it was all by recommendation, and I think he pretty much promoted me at the minimums, all the way up to where I'm at now. And I still think, I just, it's really, it's one of those things you just think about. I mean, when I started Aikido, my teacher was Fourth Dan, Philip Nagasawa, who was my very first teacher, and then Kirk Fowler was Godan. And I remember, you know, Fowler Sensei getting promoted to sixth dan, and that was a big deal. Sixth dan is a huge rank in the Aikikai, and for him. And I remember when Kashiwaya Sensei got promoted to eighth dan, as well as when Curtis Sensei got promoted to eighth dan. Which are like, that is the highest rank you can achieve now. And there's no more ninth dans. Suzuki Sensei, Nonaka Sensei, and Tabata were the last of the ninth dans, and there will be no more in the Key Society. That the highest rank you can get is eighth. And it's rank doesn't. It's kind of funny. It's good to have it, but the responsibility you acquire with that rank is quite extensive, and a lot of people aren't quite ready for that responsibility, to either accept it or want to have that responsibility. And it's quite funny. I see people, though. When I get beginners, I'll get usually two kinds. There'll be the one person who says, "So, how long does it take me to get a Shodan?" And they look up at the board. We have a board in the dojo, and it's got everybody's name and rank, and everybody wants to be on the board. And then I'll get the other people that go, "I'm not here for promotions. I'm not here for rank." And if you say that, it's just like saying you want rank. It's the same thing. If you say, "Oh, I'm not here for the promotion. I don't want it," you want it just as bad. You're just suppressing it, and it's a way for you to tell people, "I'm very humble." By the way, have you noticed how humble I am? And it just cracks me up when I hear both sides of it, because I just sit back and I go, "Oh yeah, I know what they're doing there." So I think I've talked enough. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about rank. It's a really good chapter. And what's really interesting, I'll say this a little bit more about the chapter, and that is it has the exact testing procedures, which I have to say is awesome, because we didn't have this. When I was, these testing procedures that you see, they weren't around when I was going. They just didn't happen. You didn't, you know, we in Arizona, we had a made up test that Fowler Sensei had inherited, I think, from the New York Aikikai back in the day, because he had started back in the early 60s. And we had 10 techniques and Hattori Waza. And then when the Taigis came out, he wanted everybody to learn Taigi. So at third kyu, you had to demonstrate Taigi 8. And then second kyu, you had to do 3 more Taigis. And really, you had to do Taigis were interweaved with your test, where here, you don't have to start really knowing, you don't have to perform the Taigis for a test until Sandan. So you have to perform them at Sandan, but until then, you're not required to perform them. You just have to learn them, which I think is really good, because, having an outline, knowing exactly what to do is really good. And this goes into detail of the bowing procedures and how you perform tests. And it's an invaluable tool, I would have to say. So with that being said, any questions or comments about this chapter? I can call on people. I know Sensei's like, "You all want me to call on you on Sunday." On Sunday he's like, "Nobody wants to volunteer." The best way to not get called on is to volunteer, because at least then you can decide what to say, versus being called on and not being prepared of what to say. But anyway, John has recently been asked to test for his next rank. How do you feel about that, John?
Hi, Sensei. Hi, everyone. Yeah, the I feel definitely unready, but I've always felt unready for all my tests. So it's just something that I just have to focus on. I've learned and just do my best. Yeah, and win lose no matter. It's just trying to do what I can to that test date. So yeah, my old self, half of myself, 10% of myself, well, 25% of myself is saying, "Oh, I'm not ready. I don't want to do it." So I'm trying to fight that.
Right, right. I get it. Yeah, in Arizona, we had a procedure where you'd be asked, your name would go on the board. They were, since they would type up a board and say these people will be testing, and he'd give a date. He'd give the test dates, and he'd write their names on the board. And then you had to get a sign off to be qualified. That means you had to demonstrate your test to a person in the dojo. Likely, he usually made it Sandan and above. You had to get a Sandan person's signature because we didn't have very many Sandans in the dojo in Arizona. So there was like three of them. You had to pick one and then have them stay after class and perform uh, perform the test for them, and then they would sign you off. And once they signed you off, then you were ready to test. So you'd always wait a couple weeks prior to your test so you could, prepare as much as you could. And we had a crazy rule in Arizona that we never practiced the test during class. You had to practice for your test outside of class because you wanted to have a regular class for everyone, not just specialty for the people testing. That was the rule in Arizona, and it was quite strict, So we had to prepare for our test on our off time. Then we had to go to a Sandan or above and get signed off, and then we took our piece of paper with their signature and gave it to Fowler Sensei, and then he would say, "Okay, you're ready." And what he would do for Shodan, that's the thing, and you never got to prepare for with an uke because on the day of your test he would pick your uke for you. So we had to practice with just anybody who would practice with us, and then on the day of our test, if this is one thing Fowler Sensei would do. If he thought you were trying to show off and be really fancy, he would give you an uke who was like one of our older senior members that was like 70 years old. And you'd have to do a dan task with a 70-year-old uke who can't do flying uke and show off. You can't show off that. You'd have to really do slow and do correctly. So, it was quite interesting that he would observe the people and go, okay, I'm going to do it like this to this person. And I remember we were just going, oh my God, I hope they don't. There was a gentleman in our dojo named Vince, and he was an older gentleman who loved to take uke, but he was like 77 years old, and he was, not taking break falls or anything like that. And of course, and we had to be really careful with him because we didn't want to hurt him, because that's the worst thing you could do is hurt somebody on your test, you know. So that was always fun, but here on Maui, you get to practice with your uke and then do the test. And you give it the best possible. That gives the person the best possible opportunity to demonstrate their ability with somebody who they practice with, who they know. And then, Sensei always calls in randori, and you get, 4 or 5 people you're not recognizing. You got to do the randori with people you don't know. And that really shows your ability of handling the situation. So, with that being said, anybody else? Questions or comments? Oh, Lillian?
Hi, Sensei. Hi, everybody. Um, yeah, this is an interesting chapter. I wasn't sure we were going to cover it as one chapter, if you were going to break it down again. But it's funny because when we've been told, at first when you said that we should never ask to be tested, I'm thinking, yeah, or decline a test. Because there's been times where, when Curtis Sensei goes, "Oh, Lillian, you're taking your test." And I'm like, you know what's going on in my life right now? I don't have time to, but I just love it because it actually pushes you to, because there's never a good time, right? There's never a good time for anything. Life is life. And it really pushes you to step up. So I'm really glad that, you know, good, bad, whatever, that Curtis Sensei has said, this is it, you're going to do it. And I find, at least for me, and I'm sure I haven't really talked to any of the dons above me, but I find that the closer I get to the advanced test or the higher test, um, the more I just want to have fun with it and enjoy it. And that, um, we seem to be so nervous when we get our 10th cue and our ninth cue and, right up that thing, we're just so tense and nervous about it. And later on, it's like, oh, this is no big deal. This is kind of fun, you know? And I kind of see an Aikido training as walking a path, and we're all on the same path. And sometimes we're going to be leading, sometimes we're going to be following. People are going to go up in different little groups and fall back and move around. And we're all just taking this wonderful, journey together and enjoying it. The only thing I will say about it, in my dojo is, and maybe it's because of my experiences in the past, I tend to want to make sure that each student really understands what's involved in their level, what they should know, so that if they ever show up to a seminar and they're asked to demonstrate somebody, I tell them the worst thing that can happen is when sensei looks at you and go, who's your teacher? You know, I don't ever want to be put in that position, and I don't want you to be put in that position. So, um, yeah, I think that that's really um, awesome that we get this really nice guideline to follow. And it's been really helpful as a teacher, especially out in a country dojo where I don't get to go practice as often as I'd like to, and hang with the big dogs. So that being said, thank you very much.
Yeah. Interesting you say that. I tell everyone, please learn the language in the sense of the names of the techniques. Because there's nothing worse going to a seminar, getting called up, and then they tell you the technique in Japanese and you don't know it. Or you know some sort of, is that Emperor's Clothes? You have some slang for it that is not Japanese. That's the worst you can do. So I tell all the people taking 5th Q, 4th Q, know the names of the techniques. Know the names of techniques. Because if you don't know the names of the techniques, you're going to be lost when you go to a seminar. And I remember I've gone to seminars where people didn't know. And Shinichi Sensei says the name of or they say the name of the technique in Japanese, and the person, you can tell they're like a deer in the headlights, and they just do something, and then of course it's not the technique they asked for, and they're like, he's like, no, this one, and he demonstrate what have you. So yeah, always know the names of the techniques. Very important. So Gloria, I think you raised your hand as well. Did you?
Right. Yeah. There's several things. I remember that it was about third cue before I could associate them with the movement, but to learn them. I mean, I'm from Oklahoma, and we didn't know. I mean, we didn't. We didn't speak Japanese there. We didn't run into that, and Aikido may have been there, but I didn't know that I hadn't met it yet. But when I think it took me, that you'll be appalled, maybe it took me 3 years to get to the point that I took my Shodan test. And since he was not big on testing, he didn't cast a test, except for key tests. He was really big on key. We did lots of key movements, not so much. And had it not been for black belts, I was surprised that we had them in retrospect, because he was not big on promotions. But there were a couple of guys and two women who had their black belts, and I don't know what ranks they were necessarily, but they did a lot of the teaching. And so what I did as I progressed, I went to more of the classes that were outside of the regular Saturday classes that Nalawai Sensei taught, to learn the techniques, because we would ask him to do a set of techniques and we'd get through the first one. in great detail, you know, working on minutia, which I realize is very important, but we never got through stuff. And so when they had me ready to take my Shodan, and he still hadn't said anything, and so I said, "Would it be okay if I take my Shodan?" Because, you know, they may have said something, but you know, I didn't know about that then. So I would probably still be uh, fifth queue if I, I hadn't asked. And then um, after, you know, and I continued to take the Shodan back when I did, uh, we had to go to Tabata Sensei's classes because he had decided that he was the only one who could decide when we were ready to take the test. So I took my first test after, you know, going to classes with him on some Friday night or something like that. We had to go to several weeks, 6 weeks of them, I think. And so took the test, and afterwards was continued to still go to some of the training. And he said, "You should take your Nidon." And I went, "I don't know the techniques. We don't practice them." so I've committed 2 cardinal sins, but and so it only took me 30 years to actually take my Nidon. But so, you know, 3 years, 2 Shodan, and then 30 years to Nidon. And after, at a point, Boyer Sensei said, we really need to have you take your Nidon test because there are people, you know, that I would like to also have take their Nidon, but I can't have them do it until you take yours because I'd been there the longest. So yeah, that whole thing, I know that one really, really well. But it is important to know the names of the arts. Dick Walenta, who I think you know or may have met, he's come to some seminars. He was brown belt when I met him, and when I found out that he was studying with Nalawai Sensei, and that's how I got to Lokahi. And when I took my test, he was still brown belt, and he took his 6 months later. But he had a terrible time with Tabata Sensei because he's dyslexic and he could not remember the names. And so Tabata Sensei, not being very kind, called him Reverend, a little sarcastically, and just gave him a really, really hard time. So he has never taken another test. He just decided he would not do that. But he doesn't get to come to class very often anyway. I think he's happy where he is. I was just going to say, from last week, I was thinking toward the end of the class, we were talking about the 3, let's see, I've forgotten. What it was, I was thinking that when we first started Aikido, or when I first started Aikido, it was kind of like that first level of, what did we call it? Interaction. But anyway, you know, it's like the using force. Okay. And what did you call it, Lily? And I've forgotten what word you used for it. But anyway, so, you know, we don't know. This is the way we're taught. We grab hard. We do all sorts of things because this is just the way we live life. And then we tend to go to the opposite extreme, and then we collapse. You know, we're trying not to push, not to use force. And so then we use nothing. We're waiting for the universe to move everything for us. And then we somebody, and then that's the third stage. So that's I just was thinking how it applied to at least my training and my procession, my progress through the different levels of what we talked about last week.
Yeah, that's option A, B, and C. Struggling, collapsing, connecting. Yeah, a lot of people start out struggling, trying to force things, trying to use their muscle, trying to get someone to move, making them move instead of pushing them, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's I think very common. And you see that in testing a lot too. If somebody's really wanting to throw somebody, you know, I really want to look good, so I'm going to really throw them, and they're not actually connecting with their uke and leading them. Yeah. How about Ilaria? What do you say on this subject?
Good evening, Sensei. Hi, everyone. This chapter, just reading it, clarified a lot for me. As far as like, at first I was confused, and then I went back and read the titles of like the different sections of this chapter, and I was like, oh, and it started coming back to me that ki tests And then the rest of the rank tests are separate and they have different names. So there's Shodan and there's Shodan and there's, I think, Goden and Godan. And I started noticing like kind of differences. Like Nidon doesn't have a key test. Jokyu is for Shodan. Yeah. But I also had a question for you. Did you earn rank while you were in Aikikai? And then if so, when you joined Shinshin Toitsu Aikido, did you have to start over? Or did you
Well,
still have
I didn't really train at a dojo in the Aikikai. So I started in Ki Aikido, but I traveled so much. I went to a lot of different Aikikai dojos. So all my rank has been in the Ki Society, of course. And then normally how that works is if you're not a Dan, you have to start over. But if you're a Dan, how Sensei has done it in Europe is if you're a Shodan, you just redo your Shodan. If you're a Nidan, you redo your Nidan type of thing. He's usually pretty flexible with that, and he makes sure they know the techniques and they know our principles, mainly A, B, and C. You know, if you can do A, B, and C, he usually sees that as an opportunity to test you, especially if you can define them, know what they are, and do C, option C, of course, is what we're looking for. Yeah, so that's basically how that works. And yeah, you know, I've been talking about Aikido testing, you know, and I was going to actually do next week. I was going to cover key testing, so that's kind of how I was going to break it up there, Lillian. I didn't say that at the beginning, but yes, that's how I was planning to do. Just do the regular Aikido testing and then do key testing next Monday, and discuss that because they're very different. They're very different. And just to comment on the Dan Den thing. So Dan means rank. Den, I'm not sure the actual meaning of it, but historically it comes from the Aiki Jiu-Jitsu style. You would get den ranks, and they'd be like Nyoken or whatever. They ended in den, and they all that was basically how they tested you. You know, they had the same key ranks that we have. You know, like Jodan. You know, we have Shodan, Jodan, Chuden, Kaiden. I believe that's what it is. And then Okuden. No, Okuden and then Kaiden. Nobody has Kaiden. Okuden is what Curtis Sensei and most of the high-ranking teachers are. And then the next level of Jodan. And then there's Chuden and Shodan. But Chu just means middle, Sho means beginning. I don't know what the other ones, but I'll find out for next week what they are. But yeah, they come from older styles of martial arts, that Den certificate. Because back in the day, you would get a teaching certificate from your teacher to say you could teach. And it was always ended in Den. And I know with headquarters now, you have to be, it used to be you could be Sandan to get a teaching certificate, but they've just raised it according to Sayaka, and now you have to be Yandan to establish yourself as a teacher in Japan for Shinshin Toitsu Aikido. Is you have to have not only a teaching certificate, but you have to be the rank of fourth dan. So fourth dan, and then you can apply to get a teaching certificate. It's a totally different deal. They have a different curriculum there for teaching. So a little bit different than here. You can just go, Sensei, I want to open a dojo. I'm moving to North Carolina. Can I open one? And I'll go, yes, open a dojo. And that was the thing back in the day. You know, most of the dojos in the United States, I mean, even in the 90s, you know, it wasn't unheard of for, you know, 2 or 3 Shodans to get together and open a dojo, you know, and that's Shodan, you know, that's unheard of nowadays because, you know, that's like the beginning level. So that's how it's kind of changed, you know. People are growing and developing at such a rate that you'd never see that nowadays. So anybody else would like to talk about rank, Aikido rank? in particular? How about Vitaly? Vitaly, you got anything to say about this chapter?
Hello, Sensei. Hello, everyone. I have not much experience in getting some ranks. I only second Q. And um, um, it was some period between third Q and second Q, about 2 years. That seems me quite a long period. Because I'm very tired of techniques of ZQ. It's was quite difficult for me to do them again and again and again for 2 years long, and I'm happy I have 14 new techniques that I have to study for the first Q, and 14 new techniques, and I guess techniques with weapons and so on and so on. It's a long way to study, and very very much interesting interesting pieces, very much interesting techniques to study. The second piece of difficulty was that when we were on seminars on some our classes, the sensei made some like this. All the second Q this corner, all the third Q this corner, and all the fifth and fourth Q this corner, and we do. These people do very easy techniques. These people do something more interesting, and these people doing something very interesting. And if I in this corner, I look what they are doing now, and it was very interesting. And you want to be in that corner, not this, not this. And this is the reason I want to be promoted next level. And I guess when we will be promoted with Shodan and all levels of dance on the seminars, all people with Hakama this side, all people without Hakama this side, and they're doing something much more interesting than that's my experience in ranking and promotion of the next.
Yeah, I think that's kind of funny because I'll tell you something. So in Japan, they do something very similar, of course. In Japan, in the middle of a seminar, Shinichi Sensei will break the group off. He'll say, okay, everybody who's not a teacher, go over here. All the teachers come over there with him. And I remember having, to go over with Shinichi's group, and I'm looking over at the other group going, well, they're doing techniques. They're so fun. I want to go over there. But I'm having to do heat testing stuff over here. And I'm the junior guy. So, of course, I'm getting, all the, I'm the junior guy over there. Well, I'd much rather be over there doing techniques. I feel much more comfortable doing techniques than I do this. I remember my first experience in Japan having to do that. I didn't want to be in the big group. I wanted to be in the smaller group, with all the lower ranking people. So I can do the techniques instead of practice key testing. Because when you're there, of course, you don't just key test your partner. You have to key test Shinichi Sensei. And then he'll tell you if your key test is good or not good, So I remember it's you have to be really on it. Otherwise, he's going to be like, no. And then of course, it gets to be a learning opportunity then, but you want to be, doing it correctly. So, Linda Sasaki Sensei, we're talking about rank and promotions, chapter 10. Have any good stories for us or comments on this subject?
I kind of came in listening to what Gloria said about the Reverend and Tabata Sensei, and I can understand it because there was a period in which I was going to Aikido almost like 6 days a week, and then every other Sunday, there was one Sunday we had to go to Tabata Sensei's class. And when you went for your black belt, you had to show up for at least 8 classes. And it was still the old hard style. And when you're being attacked, I mean, those guys were pretty sincere. I mean, I used to have to wear long sleeve blouses and high collars to work because I'd have these bruises on my arms, on my, my shoulders, everything. And I tried to cover it up. And, one time I was at the supermarket and this woman was concerned that I was being abused somehow. And I said, "Oh no, I'm going for my black belt. You should see the other guy," just to lighten the mood. But yeah, it was difficult. I mean, they came and they grabbed, and I remember this one guy, and I love this guy, Bill Apaka. And Prakash said that would talk about Nalawai Sensei being of Hawaiian ancestry and whatnot. But way in the beginning, we had 3 of them. It was Gene Naipo, Bill Apaka, and Clayton Nalawai. And Bill Apaka was with Tabata Sensei. And I tell you, that guy, once he grabbed you, Eric Donaka used to call it the nickname the Opihi, because you couldn't get him off you. And the thing that was really a challenge was he did it to everybody. It didn't matter whether you were in his class or from another class. And when I was going for that black belt, if you got Bill Apaka called up to be one of your opponents, it was like, he doesn't, how we come and we run and we try to grab quickly. Bill is kind of like, he'd be the last person and he'd be sneaking up on you, and then he would go bang, and then he'd do the judo turn. So you couldn't get him off. And it was a problem for everybody. So, Tabata Sensei and Bill Apaka had judo backgrounds. So I thought, okay, there's my option. I went to see my uncle. And God bless those judo guys from Japan, because he got his rank in Japan. And we modified something. So on one practice, I got grabbed by Bill, even though I tried to avoid him. I tried to do it the Aikido way, and I thought, okay, I can't get him off. So I did a modified Tobinage, and I got him off. And everybody was so stunned. They just stood there and looked at me, and I could hear Tabata Sensei yelling, "What are you guys doing? Come on, attack her, attack her." So when I finally went for the test, he didn't call Bill Apaka on me. But it was funny because when we walked off the mat on that practice, I came up and I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, "Bill, I practiced that just for you." And he cracked up laughing.
That's funny. It's funny. So I'll tell you just a really quick story. We were talking about, when they do randori nowadays, it's a set attack, a set response, a set attack, set response. You're not allowed to do anything out of the ordinary. And I was talking to Curtis Sensei about that, and he goes, "Well, if you do something, attack differently, then that means I'm allowed to do whatever I can to you. It's the agreement is now null and void." And they were telling a story about the old dojo, and they had done randori, and some guy was being a real bugger, and comes to attack the guy, and the guy just went bam, just hit him right in the nose. Oh. Dropped the guy right there on the mat. And Suzuki-sensei had to go, whoa, stop, because the guy was not attacking according to the agreement. And you have to understand, if you're not attacking towards the agreement, then, you can do whatever you want. And that's what kind of gets me is when people are, when you're on the mat and you're training a certain technique, the person knows the attack. You have to attack in that certain way, and then you can practice your connection. But if you deviate, then that gives the other person a right to deviate because he has to connect with you. So you have to always be careful. If you're attacking incorrectly, that means the agreement is off. And you have to do something like what you did, Linda. Because it was not he was breaking the agreement. So anyway, anybody else would like to have a question or comment? I didn't call on you, Kiyomi, because I didn't know if you wanted to talk or not, but please feel free if you'd like to say something.
Thank you, Sensei. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I really, only experience I have about ranks are, actually I'm used to that system. When I was growing up, I was learning calligraphy and abacus. And those schools,
Wow.
they use those ranks. And actually I got the Shodan for calligraphy and abacus too. And we're kids, so it was fun, and it motivated me, those ranks, to keep going. I think that's why the school was using the system. And I can probably relate to, nobody attacks us, but then it's abacus. but then I was so nervous about abacus testing because we have like 50 kids in a room, and the teacher was very strict. When they said start calculating, we used to jump, because we were so nervous. And then I remember my hands are shaking, and but the abacus, if your hands are shaking, you can't calculate, So I think through that experience, my mother said I can't quit until I have Shodan. So I had to keep going. And then I think going through that experience, I think I became more brave, even though I don't want to have this nervousness, but I learned to, I guess, sit there and overcame. And at the end, who remained, we all started together, and we look at the kids, were still there after Shodan. I think those kids, it's not very many, right? But those kids learned to persevere. That's, I think, perseverance, and also, driving ourselves. I think that's the system taught us. And it was good for me, but I don't think I like that once I get adult, because I think it's really stressful to go through the testing. But I enjoy listening to everybody's experiences. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you. So to end, I do have a quick story. There was once a young archer who won every archery contest he participated in. Because of his success, the young and rather boastful champion challenged a Zen master who was renowned for his skill as an archer. The young man demonstrated remarkable technical proficiency when he hit a distant bullseye on his first try and then split the arrow with the second shot. "There," he said to the old man, "see if you can match that." Undisturbed, the Zen master did not draw his bow, but rather motioned for the young archer to follow him up the mountain, where they could test their archery mastery and not just skill. Curious about the old fellow's intention, the young champion followed him high into the mountains until they reached a deep chasm over which a rather flimsy and shaky log played the role of a bridge. Calmly stepping out into the middle of the unsteady and certainly perilous bridge, the old master picked a faraway tree as his target, drew his bow, and fired a clean, direct hit. "Now it's your turn," he said, as he gracefully stepped back onto the safe ground. Staring with terror into the seemingly bottomless and beckoning abyss, the young man could not force himself to step out onto the log, no less shoot at a target. You have much skill with your bow, said the Zen master, sensing his challenger's predicament, but you have little skill with the mind that lets loose the shot. When you improve that, please find me, and I will gladly accept your challenge. So with that, we'll close. Domo arigato gozaimashita. And I'll see you next week where we'll talk about key tests. See you later. Thanks.